tool for tracking progress on transport-related climate action and commitments, providing policymakers all over the world and the transport community with data and insights to inform decision-making and accelerate action towards sustainable low-carbon transport. Back in 2021, GIZ and SLOCAT jointly launched the NDC Transport Tracker after consulting many of our partners in the global transport community. And in the next 45 minutes, we want to share with you the latest insights and climate strategies, as well as introduce the newest improvements to the tracker. So we're really launching a new and improved NDC Transport Tracker for everyone's use. So my name is Christopher Decky. I am the Director of Global Advocacy and Engagement at the SLOCAT Partnership and the moderator for today's session. I'm joined by Nadja Taeger, who is an advisor on sustainable mobility and climate change at GIZ, and my amazing colleague, Nikola Medimorec, who is the Director of Data Analysis and Research at the SLOCAT Partnership. So just a few housekeeping rules for all of you. As I mentioned before, this event is being recorded. So please do turn off your cameras if you don't want your face to be in the recording. It will be shared on the Changing Transport YouTube channel and on social media. And if you do have any questions, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the event. So please do share them via the chat box, and we'll try to answer them after the presentation by both Nadja and Nikola. Now, for a quick introduction on the SLOCAT partnership, SLOCAT is the international multi-stakeholder partnership powering systemic transformations and a just transition towards equitable, healthy, green, and resilient transport and mobility systems for people on the planet. And we deliver on our mission through co-creation, co-leadership, and co-delivery across knowledge, advocacy, and dialogue on the intersection between transport, climate change, and sustainability. And our multi-sectoral, multi-stakeholder partnership engages a vibrant and inclusive ecosystem across transport associations, NGOs, academia, government, multilateral organizations, philanthropy, and business, as well as a large community of world-class experts and change makers on the topic of transport. Now, I think you all know who GIZ is, but GIZ supports the German government in achieving its objectives in the field of international cooperation for sustainable development. And to put it another way, GIZ is the federal enterprise that supports change for Germany and around the globe. GIZ is currently working with ministries, NGOs, academia, and the private sector on around 1,700 projects in 120 countries throughout the world. And GIZ works on a large variety of topics. Among them is climate change, of course, and the transport sector. And GIZ's Changing Transport team is presenting you on one part of its work today. Now, for a quick review of the agenda, we're going to start with a nice, fun quiz to test your knowledge on NDCs, followed by a presentation on the latest insights and a presentation on the latest improvements to the NDC Transport Tracker. And we'll, like I mentioned before, we'll conclude with a Q&A and next steps, so please do put your questions in the chat box. I'd like to now pass it over to Nadja to start our fun little quiz.
Thank you very, very much, Chris. Then, Nikola, do me the favor exactly of sharing the screen, of sharing the Menti. Everybody in the audience, if you like to participate and test your knowledge on NDCs and climate policies and transport, please visit menti.com and insert the code that you see on the screen right now. And once you have done that, we will start the quiz and see what you know, what you can guess before we go to the presentation here from Nikola, show you the tracker where you can find your answers to the questions as well, and then at the end we'll give you the solutions. So for the first question is, how many second generation NDCs include transport greenhouse gas mitigation targets? With transport greenhouse gas mitigation targets, it's a bit of a complex name, but we are referring to NDCs that specifically commit to reducing emissions, greenhouse gas emissions from the transport sector. So almost all NDCs do contain greenhouse gas emission targets that are economy-wide. But of course, to really to really quantify whether a country is on track, it's very, very helpful to also define sectoral targets. And we are looking specifically at the transport sector, obviously. So yeah, we see answers coming in. There is a few people that think that more than half of NDCs do include these sectoral targets, then and shared between people that think that it's between 20 and 50% and less than 20%, less than 1/5 of countries. We will see later which one is the correct answer. I'll give you a bit more time for the participants that haven't yet submitted their answer. Let's see what you think. We consider it to be kind of a sign of ambition if a country includes such a target, because, as I said before, it's quantifiable, it's measurable whether that target is reached, and it's much more tangible and much more of a hard fact to include an emissions target, an emissions reduction target for the transport sector. Nikola, I think we can move on to the next question. So here we want to know whether it's true that the vast majority of those targets that I just mentioned come from high-emitting countries. So obviously the European Union as a region and the United States, for example, or whether it's more of the rest of the world, not the high emitters that actually quantify how much they want to reduce their emissions, or how much they want to cut the transport emissions. I'll give you time to think and to submit your answer. And I think, Nicola, maybe we can move on to the next question. We have 5 questions in total for you. Nicola, can you show the next slide? Perfect. Thank you. And then as Chris mentioned, this has been kind of a long journey. And when the first NDCs came out, were published or submitted to the UNFCCC, GIZ and SLOCAT both did analyses on this first generation, and we built upon this analysis to create this tracker and to approach this in a bit more systematic way, so that we can compare the 2 generations. We call it generations, the NDCs. Of course, there is not like one cutoff date when all first NDCs were submitted at the same time. Countries did that, or turned their INDCs into first NDCs at different points in time. But for comparison and to identify trends, we define the first generation, and then the updated and second NDCs that were handed in later, around 2020 or 2021, as the second generation. And we do see trends and shifts. And here we give you 3 options. Do we see a change in the references to active mobility, from walking towards cycling? Do we see a shift from shift to improve, actually, from public transport to electric mobility? Or is it that countries want to promote rail transport, and this shift from road to rail? We'll give you maybe like 10 seconds more. And here we have a question on adaptation, because of course NDCs do focus on the mitigation aspect, but there are many countries that also include their commitments and also needs in terms of adaptation and resilience. And there are also some that do that for the transport sector specifically. And here we put the thesis that those references have doubled in comparison to the first NDCs that were submitted when the Paris Agreement was ratified. Hey, so most of you seem to think that this is true, that the importance, at least in terms of how many reference in the NDCs, has indeed increased for transport adaptation, or let's say for adaptation of the transport system to climate change impacts. Maybe 10 seconds more before we move to the last question. the audience seems to be quite sure. And one last question on long-term strategies, because we are not only looking at nationally determined contributions, but also on long-term low greenhouse gas emission development strategies that are also submitted to the UNFCCC by some countries, and would like to know what you think, what is like the most important type of mitigation category in terms of transport that those LTS feature. You will see that we defined different categories for the different mitigation actions that we look for in documents to make the whole thing a bit more tangible. And 3 of those are those improvements in transport systems, then electrification through one way or the other, and then demand management and mode shift, the promotion of shifting to a low carbon mode. Okay, perfect. Like I said, we will give the solution at the end of the webinar, so you don't have to wait too long. This is a short event, obviously, but first let me hand over to Nikola to tell you a little bit about what we see in the latest nationally determined contributions and long-term strategies. Thank you very, very much for participating in our little quiz.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Nadja, for going through the quiz. And yeah, in the following slides, I will show the latest key insights on our transport and climate strategies. And as Nadja said, many of them will give you probably also hints to the correct response to the questions. So yeah, please listen carefully. So first, as of the end of July and still valid for until today, there were 148 second generation NDCs submitted. Under second generation NDCs, we usually understand every NDC submitted since late 2018. They're either called second NDC or updated first NDC. Some countries even submitted revised version of these second generation NDCs following the call of COP26 and COP27 to enhance the climate ambition in their documents. Compared to this, the first generation NDCs, of which we had 168, they were mostly submitted in 2015 and 2016 during the development and the agreement of the Paris Agreement. And then, as you can see in the figure, almost every country in every region submitted a second generation NDC. And now also we see less submissions coming in. Like in several weeks, there have been no new submissions. We can almost say that this second cycle or the second generation of NDCs is complete. On the other hand, as you can see on the right, long-term low greenhouse gas emission development strategies or long-term strategies are still very much in development. So far, only 66 LTSs were submitted, and they come mostly from middle and high-income countries. Now, in the NDC Transport Tracker, we try to identify targets and actions on transport adaptation and mitigation. As Nadja already described, kind of targets are for us any statements, and they're very important features also kind of. And we see targets as any statements that have a quantitative value to be reached by a certain year. And on the other hand, actions are any kind of measures or activities that we plan to do around our transport. As you can see in the slide, we identified that 42% of second generation NDCs contain transport, any kind of transport targets. And actually for us, the most important element of an NDC is if it contains a transport greenhouse gas mitigation target. For example, this could be that by 2030, transport emissions should be 30% below 2010 levels. In the first generation of NDCs, only 8% of them had such a target, and now in the second generation, it grew to doubled to 16%, or as you can see here, to 23 second generation NDCs. And in the map, anything that's dark gray or that's yellow is one of these 23 countries. It's really great progress, and we welcome it very much. The only issue is kind of that the NDCs with the transport greenhouse gas mitigation targets are not the biggest transport emitters. So their impact actually is relatively low compared to overall transport BAU and transport emission development. Then further assessing the non-greenhouse gas transport targets, which are any kind of targets that do not explicitly cover emissions, but rather focus on related activities and maybe include a target such as, for example, to deploy 1,000 electric buses by a certain year, by 2030, for example. Here, we see that there are like 120 targets being featured in the second generation NDCs. The analysis shows us that the focus is strongly on zero emission vehicles and electrification. In the previous generation, mode share targets, which are kind of targets who want to increase the share of public transport, walking and cycling, for example, or rail share, have been very popular, but they decreased subsequently. And now, we have zero emission vehicles with 38% and vehicle efficiency with 27% as the most popular non-greenhouse gas transport targets. Then now looking at the actions there, we can see that NDCs became a lot more sophisticated in terms of the action plans, because there are twice as many transport mitigation actions in the second generation NDCs than in the first generation NDCs. The figure on the right shows the categories of transport mitigation actions and how they were distributed. And here it's also important to understand that the most popular category is mode shift and demand management. But this category consists of several indicators and several subcategories and actions, while on the other hand, we have electrification, which is one category that has only like one main subcategory and several, it's just very few indicators. So actually, on the category level, yes, mode shift and demand management is the most important one. But then when you look at the action level, then you see that electromobility is the most common mitigation action. Now, briefly looking at transport adaptation and resilience, we can still see many shortcomings. So far, only 6 second generation NDCs contain transport adaptation targets. And then, yes, there's also like an increase of transport adaptation actions. So for example, like also the number doubled, similar as the mitigation actions. But then there's the huge issue of that they are very general or don't really just scratch the surface. They barely cover any actions for specific transport modes and don't provide any great detail that's really necessary to understand what the country wants to implement and how they want to implement it. Yeah, that's all from my side. I will now give it back to Nadja for the walkthrough to NDC Transport Tracker.
Thank you very, very much, Nikola. So for the people that listened closely, I think you found or heard the solutions already to some of the questions that we raised. I will now take 10 minutes of your time to show you how the NDC Transport Tracker looks at the moment, and to give you a couple of examples of what you can do with it. So I'm sharing my screen. I hope that everyone can see that. The tracker is part of the Changing Transport website. As Chris has said, Changing Transport is basically a team of colleagues at GIZ that work on transport and mobility related issues and climate change. And well, together with SLOCAT, we developed this tracker. We have this introductions website, or this page where that basically gives you information. A quick overview of the adaptation content of the different categories that we mentioned before, that Nikola just mentioned, what kind of targets are included in the NDCs and so on. A bit of how this framework of avoid, shift, improve is distributed in NDCs. And what the difference is between the first generation that you see here in green, and then the newer NDCs that are here depicted in blue, and then a bit on adaptation, what you just heard from Nikola. I'm not going to go into the details, just to show you what you can see here on the start page. But this is not all. This is basically a summary of what we have analyzed, what we have done with our data, what we have concluded, and we want to give you the same opportunity. So we have this. It's loading. I hope it's it's going to show soon. We have this database, basically this website where we publish our data. How it works, you can see here we have these 4 blocks. I will try to load the page again. Maybe we have some internet issues in the office at this moment. But anyway, so you have here additional information. You can see here how to use the database, what the history is of it, why SLOCAT and GIZ got together, and what we thought about doing this. A summary analysis, so basically what Nikola just presented, and then some key recommendations that we differ from what we see in the NDCs and long-term strategies. So this is how it looks like. We have different sections. We look at like at a high level on countries, but then also defined the different references that we find to transport according to transport targets, to mitigation adaptation actions, and something more general that we call process and benefits, and then 2 ways of visualizing that information. We could now look at, for example, what the Latin American region is doing, as an example, in transport. And we can here click on select different regions, but also we can look at one specific country. We can also look at filter for the socioeconomic classification based on the World Bank, or look at which countries are members of one of those many alliances and transport coalitions that have formed in the last years around the COPs, specifically, of course, COP26. But let's take a look at what the Latin American region is doing. So here we have different types of the policy documents defined. The first NDCs, obviously, that were handed in until 2020, and then NDCs that came after. Those are so many because it's really difficult to, or countries manage this differently. Some countries hand in a first NDC and then others a second, and other countries update their first NDC 3 times. So you can select these different types of climate policy documents and then see here the results. So you see here an overview of, for example, what Barbados, for example, includes in its updated NDC. It has here we see that the updated NDC of Barbados contains 4 kinds of targets. In the economy-wide target, that is what is really basically obligatory for countries to define by how much they will reduce emissions. They define this in different ways, but they do usually state what they are, where they want to go in terms of emissions overall. And then some targets, as Nikola has presented to some countries, has pledged for transport-related targets, as Nikola has presented to you. So in the case of Barbados, for example, the country does include a non-greenhouse gas related target. Conditional and unconditional refers to whether the country says that this is conditional upon assistance, either financial or technical, from other countries. What else can we see? For example, what other countries? Here you can always change how much you see, but you see we have different categories, and if you go scroll over the different categories, you can see that, for example, Dominican Republic actually established an MRV mechanism specifically for the transport sector, which for the MRV geeks among us might be interesting information, actually. We can also, of course, look at specific countries. So if we clear all filters here and look for Cambodia, for example, we see an overview here already of what Cambodia includes in its different documents, and we also have a country page that I hope loads more or less rapidly. Yes. So you can see here which policy documents Cambodia has submitted so far to the UNFCCC. You can see that it's a member, or that it has pledged its allegiance basically to the breakthrough agenda of the climate champions, or has endorsed the breakthrough agenda. We give a bit of socioeconomic classification because we think that this is very relevant to kind of assess the level of ambition of a country and the means it has to be ambitious on climate change mitigation or adaptation. And then we also This data is based on the World Bank information, and then based on EDCA, we have information on emissions in total, and then also transport-related emissions. And if you scroll down here, you see actually the quotes. We want to be transparent in what we and the information that we give and the statements that we make. So we don't only like say, okay, I don't know, Cambodia includes a non-greenhouse gas transport target, but also want to show you why we say that, what the quote is. And here, if you click on the link on the page number, this will lead you then to the document itself. You can then look for page 98, for example, in this case, and verify whether what we put there is correct. And Cambodia actually does pledge this type of target. So this is the country page. We have here different, again, like we are mirroring the structure of the main page. We have different tables here. So for what kinds of climate actions the country has, what kind of targets, but also what kinds of other types of references that seemed important to us, like the MRV mechanism from the Dominican Republic, for example, or references to co-benefits to sustainable development that goes beyond the reduction of emissions from transport sector. If we are interested in a bit more specific transport modes, for example, or activity types, which is what we call the distinction between freight and passenger transport, we can look for that also. So we can filter here for different types of measures, and whether they are urban, for example, or in this case, like freight transport. Let's see, for example, which low-income countries classified by the World Bank as low-income countries have measures in the freight sector. Freight is a sector that is featured, unfortunately, very little, even though it all obviously makes up a very large share of emissions. And here you will see all the different types of mitigation measures that are related to freight in the NDCs or in the LTS, because I haven't filtered for any specific document. So you can see, for example, that Uganda has or refers to freight and saying that they want to put investment into their railway sector and improve or move from road to rail this way. And like you see here, if you move on the country, you see what the actual quote is in the NDC. And then maybe one last example. We have talked about electrification. Maybe let's look at, some of you are interested, I know, in urban transport. We can filter here for urban transport and look here for specific transport mitigation actions that we have defined. And one of them is electric mobility. So let's see what countries make reference to electric mobility in the urban sphere. So electric mobility is the overall category, and it is made up by two different kinds of indicators. You can see here that it's not that many countries that are being so specific, which makes sense, right? NDCs are national documents, but some do focus on the urban sphere. For example, Kyrgyzstan is planning to replace buses with internal combustion engines in its capital in Bishkek. That is just playing around with the tracker a little bit. That is parts of what you can do. All the data is downloadable. We have here the world map that gives you a bit of an overview of what you have selected here in the form of a map, and the colors refer to the different types or the different generations of NDC documents. And then we have here an overview in numbers where you can see for the different mitigation categories that we have defined. So transport system improvements, electrification, mode shift and demand management, everything that was mentioned by Nikola before. How many of the NDCs that have been submitted so far actually contain measures, and you can also break that down by different factors. But I think I'm running a bit out of time, so I just want to tell you something very important. Like I mentioned, all the data that we use for our analyses and all the data that is behind the tracker is available to you. It's freely accessible. You can either use the tracker for your own analyses or download the Excel that is kind of the first step that we fill when a new NDC or LTS is published. The Excel looks like this basically. So there is a table of content that guides you through. There is this tab that contains our own analyses, the basis for that, and then for the different categories, the different tabs. It's a bit of a monster, so I cannot go into detail, but as I said, it's freely available on the website, so please feel free to download it and play around with it, do your own analysis with it. And with that, one last thing that I would like to share with you is what we are planning to do next, or what we are working on right now. Which has to do with text mining. So within GIZ, there is a data service center, the so-called data service center, and different GIZ projects from different sectors got together to look at what text mining can do for us, or natural language processing can do for us in analyzing whatever kind of document automatically. You can imagine that going through an NDC or maybe a long-term strategy of 120 pages is quite a lot of work and takes quite some time. And we hope that by doing this automatically with the help of an algorithm, we can expand our scope and not only look at NDCs or LTS, but look at the many more policy documents that are out there to give us an idea of what countries are pledging or planning for the transport sector in terms of climate change. And for this, we are currently developing this app here. One can upload whatever kind of document as long as it's in a PDF. And here in this, where what I've opened here for you is an example, the revised or updated NDC of the Seychelles, and then the algorithm runs over it and gives different results. This is just an outlook. This is not ready yet. I just wanted to let you know that please keep an eye out for what we have in store for you on that. We will expand the transport tracker in the future to include these kinds of other policy documents that are not NDCs or LTS, and see what kind of analysis we can do with that. Yeah, that is it from my side for now. I hand over to Chris. Thank you. Chris, we don't hear you. You're muted, I think.
Okay, I think I had some issues with the mic. So I think we're going to go back to the quiz now to share the answers, Nikola, to show what everybody had responded to, and then to show you the correct answer. So I hope you're all paying attention and maybe learned a few things about some of the questions that we had asked. So the first question was, how many second generation NDCs include transport greenhouse gas emission mitigation targets? Most of you put less than 20%. And the right answer is, Nikola?
Yeah, it's A, so like the majority of you were correct. It's less than 20% as you saw, like 16%.
So most of you got that answer correct. Good job. The next question.
Yeah. The next one. Okay,
go ahead.
Chris, I can take. Yeah. So the next one, again, the majority of you were correct. This statement here is false. As also I mentioned, kind of the majority of second generation NDCs with transport greenhouse gas mitigation targets actually come from middle income or like like let's better say, less emitting countries from Africa, Asia, and Latin America. So yeah, definitely a lot more improvement needed here in terms of NDCs. But yeah, great that you are all correct, or most of you are correct. Then with the next one, yeah, this one here again, yeah, the majority of you were right. As I mentioned, there was this huge shift from mode share targets, also like which are relevant or like which focus on public transport towards actions and targets on electromobility. So yeah, definitely more huge change there from public transport actions to electromobility actions. Then the fourth one was again a true or false statement, and here everybody went all in on to say it's true. And yes, as you heard me presenting and also Nadja, the NDCs became much more sophisticated, and yes, they have much more content on adaptation as well as mitigation, and they doubled the content there. Then the very last one, just quickly to yeah, here it is. So the last one was a bit tricky. In terms of the phrasing, because also as you saw in my presentation, there's a difference between the category and the actions. So actually here in this question, we were asking for the most popular mitigation category. So actually, yes, it is mode shift and demand management. So the majority of you actually are wrong. But yes, when you look at the action level, then electrification is much more frequent and much more often used. But then on the category level, a lot more indicators and subcategories fall under mode shift and demand management. They're much more referenced in the LTS and also in the NDCs as well. As you saw, they have a similar distribution. But yeah, but thanks a lot for participating in this quiz. And like we said, like I said, the idea is really to get you more motivated to do your own research and to go through and explore the tracker, the Excel file, or the online database that we have here. But yeah, now back to Chris, and for the Q&A.
Great, thank you, Nikola. Thank you, Nadja, for your great presentations. So now we have a couple of questions that came up in the chat. What I'll try to do is I'll take all three, and then I'll hand the floor back to Nadja and Nikola to answer them as they see fit. But the three questions that we've been able to gather are these. Will the NDC tracker show the progress on achieving climate targets, and will it somehow contribute to the global stocktake? Then we have another one. Would be interesting to see how each country regarding its engagements is contributing by percent in the global reduction. And then we have a third question about the method for the review. Did we use a list of keywords to search and identify which documents include certain topics or parameters? And if so, are the list of keywords published? So those are the three main questions that we received. So I don't know, Nikola and Nadja, you're the experts here, how you want to tackle this.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Maybe if you're okay with me taking the first question.
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Yeah. So, so yes, the tracker on showing the progress towards achieving the climate targets, and like the global stocktake contributions. First of all, I think the overall intention of the tracker is, as the name says, to track the overall progress and track the progress over time. So that's why we kind of try to feature the first generation, the second generation NDCs, and kind of all revisions that are made throughout the years. So definitely, while it maybe does not really directly give you an answer to and directly show you here this is the progress being made, based on the data and based on the things that you see in the tracker, you can make also this kind of analysis and see the progress on towards the climate targets. And also we are working more and more to enhance the tracker with more features. For example, like we are considering to indicate the implementation status of certain activities, or when we see, okay, the NDC has a certain project, does it really mention, is it being implemented, is it being planned, or is it maybe already kind of completed or going to start operation very soon? And I feel like that's also very important to support the tracking of the progress. Overall, it's also very important when you want to track the progress towards achieving climate targets to look at the emission status and how the emissions are developing. Here, in the country sheets, we feature the emission data, but we don't show really the development because it's maybe a bit goes beyond our scope and might be more many other knowledge products are actually from SLOCAT and from GIZ are focused on this topic. So it goes maybe beyond the scope of this tracker. But then for the global stocktake, definitely we were using the tracker and the findings as for evidence-based advocacy, and kind of used many of the findings there to feed into inputs for our submissions, our contributions to the global stocktake, and I feel like it was very valuable also to have, because I think the tracker, the NDC Transport Tracker, is one of the most comprehensive and biggest databases on NDCs and on transport NDCs especially. So it really gives a lot of insights and can give you a good picture of kind of what is being done on transport and what's the current stocktake, what's the current status there. I don't know, Nadja, if you want to add.
One example. Yeah, thank you, Nikola. One example to make this more tangible could maybe be the freight sector. As I mentioned before, freight is really only mentioned, I think, in 20 or 25% of all mitigation references. That is obviously not enough. And does not reflect very well the magnitude of the problem that we have if we do not decarbonize the freight sector as well. So this is something that came out from the analysis and that we can use in our advocacy, or in SLOCAT's advocacy efforts, in GIZ's advisory efforts, of course, and any way you can think of putting it to use. I saw that Kauta asked a question or made a comment saying that it would be very interesting to see how the different countries contribute to emission reduction, and that is certainly true. I think Nikola already answered or responded to that in parts. Just wanted to add to this that it's that it is something that we try to put on our country pages, but that a comparison between the countries is really, really complicated because they use these different types of targets that make comparison very, very tricky. Even comparison sometimes between the own countries' different climate plans. So from one NDC to the other, they move from a fixed level target, from saying we want to reduce, I don't know, by 20 megatons by 2030 to we want to reduce by 33% in comparison to a business as usual scenario. Putting this in real numbers is highly difficult, but certainly a very interesting exercise. Is there anything that we haven't answered? Yeah, maybe the methods for review. Well, we don't only use keywords. We don't just like look for a certain keyword in an NDC, but instead we really go through the whole document, and then anything that we see as a transport reference, we take out as a quote. We put the page number to make it transparent. And you see a definition of these of what we call indicators, of how we kind of label the references in on the website for one, but also in the Excel that I showed to you quickly. There is, if you go through the tabs back at the end there, you will see a definition for all the different indicators. So that should give you an indication of why and how we label references the way we do. I hope that answers your question. And once we include the text mining, then a natural language processing method, obviously we will add an explanation on what the method is on that behind this text mining tool to the website.
Thank you very much, Nikola and Nadja. I know we have no time left, actually, so time is up, but I know, Nikola, you want to go through some other resources that might be useful to our audience.
Yeah, I just want to share a couple of material with you, and it might also help you, like, kind of to get more information about kind of some of the questions that have been raised. For example, like our SLOCAT Transport Climate and Stability Global Status Report, the 3rd edition, which is being already released in modules, but is coming out in mid-September with like, the full release. And there also you will find the latest research on NDCs and on long-term strategies. There you can also find some attempts at kind of taking the tracker a step further and seeing how this transport targets are contributing to the global emission reductions as in the Q&A, and as well as the brochure by GIZ and also many other advocacy-based material that I really would recommend you to invite you to kind of check out and to read. It's very insightful, and of course, we will continue to update them and to keep them up to date. And there's also, if you're interested in further UNFCCC processes and COP business, please check out our COP27 summary, or also our engagement at COP28, which will be updated and expand continuously over the next weeks until the event. Yeah. But overall, thanks a lot for joining this webinar. You can reach out to us here, our email addresses, and yeah, it was really great to see all of you here and to present you the latest insights and walk you through the NDC Transport Tracker.
Yes, and we'll be also sharing a survey to gauge your opinion of the event and, of course, on other things. So please do make sure to fill out that survey when you have a minute. And as Nikola mentioned, we appreciate all of your participation, and thank you very much on behalf of SLOCAT and GIZ. We hope that this really does help your work, and always come to us if you have any questions, as Nikola mentioned, and we'll be happy to answer them. So good luck, everybody, with everything you're doing, and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you.